Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our first draft public webinar for the Priority Climate Action Plan under the US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program. We can go to the next slide. Before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody can participate in the language of their choice. So I'm going to give some instructions on how to make sure that you can hear in either English or Spanish through simultaneous translation. I'll let the interpreters say what I just said in Spanish.
Hola, muy bienvenidos a todos. Gracias por estar en esta junta el día de hoy, que es el taller público que están subiendo ahora de CPRG y PCAP. Solamente para dejarles saber de que vamos a pasar por algunas instrucciones a cómo usted puede seleccionar su lenguaje preferido para que usted pueda escucharlo en el español o sea en el inglés. Gracias. Back to you.
Thank you. To select the language of your choice, click on the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select your language.
Y en la parte de abajo, usted puede seleccionar el icono que está en forma de un globo. Usted le hace clic ahí para poder seleccionar su lenguaje preferido.
Great, thank you. And with that, I will start interpretation and we can begin. Okay, great. And Sarah, if you want to take it away, turn it back over to you.
Great. One moment, let me just. Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Izant, Deputy Secretary for Climate Change at the California Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you so much for joining this virtual public webinar to present the state's draft Priority Climate Action Plan. It will be submitted on March 1 under the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program, or CPRG. We are pleased to partner with the US EPA on the CPRG program. We see this as an opportunity not only to draft climate plans and implement the state's climate priorities, but as a way to partner with the federal government and help deliver the emissions reductions necessary to meet the commitments under the Paris Agreement and to avoid the worst effects of climate change. The Priority Climate Action Plan that we will present today is a milestone in an ongoing relationship with our federal partners in EPA, tribal nations, fellow state agencies, and representatives from counties, cities, air districts, and of course, with all of you. We're committed to continuing our work together to find shared climate solutions that maximize emissions reductions and bring cleaner air and other lasting benefits to our communities, particularly those long overburdened with pollution. I'd like to thank all of the state and local agencies that have been involved in this effort. I'm pleased to say that you will hear from some of them today. Thanks again for being here. And with that, I will now turn it back over to Sarah Jo.
Thanks so much. I am happy to go over some logistics for the webinar today, and then we can go ahead and get started. Before I begin, my name is Sarah Jo Chambellin. I'm the International Advisor at the California Resources Board and have also been serving as Project Manager for the state of California for the CPRG program. So first, to begin with some logistics, this workshop is being recorded and will be posted to our CPRG meetings and workshops page. We will have 2 hours allotted today. We have a good turnout. Thank you for joining. So as you will see in the agenda, we have a number of state and local agencies that will present remarks before we turn it over to open comments. We'll work to hear from as many commenters as possible so that we ask that stakeholders keep their feedback to no longer than 2 minutes and to submit longer comments in writing. Stakeholders will be able to submit written feedback online until February 10th at almost midnight, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. You can find a link to submit feedback as well as all relevant documents, including the presentation on our CPRG meetings and workshops page. We go to the next slide, please. As far as the agenda, today's agenda will have 5 parts. First, we'll give an overview of the CPRG program. Second, we'll give a summary of the state's process to develop the Priority Climate Action Plan, or PCAP. Third, we'll hear from state agency representatives on California's PCAP measures, which makes up the bulk of our PCAP. And fourth, we'll hear from, today we'll hear from Fresno COG, or Council of Governments, on their respective PCAP measures. And last, we would love to hear from all of you, to hear feedback and questions from all of our participants. So thank you for holding your comments and questions until the end. Next slide. So an overview of EPA's CPRG program before we get started. The CPRG program was created under the Inflation Reduction Act and is administered by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And the CPRG program has 2 phases. In the first, states, metropolitan areas, tribes, and territories applied for planning grants to deliver 3 climate plans over 4 years. In the second phase, entities can compete for a total of $4.6 billion in funding to implement the actions in the first plan, the Priority Climate Action Plan, which we are discussing today. In California, the state and 10 metropolitan areas have been offered a CPRG planning grant, as well as some tribal nations that fall within California's boundary. Next slide. So we are focusing on the Priority Climate Action Plan today, but it is worth pointing out that is just the first of 3 plans under CPRG. This slide summarizes the distinct priorities for each of the 3 plans. So for the Priority Climate Action Plan due March 1st, California has prioritized outreach and coordination across the many stakeholders, tribal nations, and other entities. Given that the actions listed in the PCAP is a prerequisite for competitive CPRG funding, this outreach is critical. The Comprehensive Climate Action Plan due in 2025 will look at all greenhouse gas sources and carbon sinks, and will have a longer list of climate actions. And the plan will also require more analysis along continued outreach. In 2027, the status report will focus on listing what we have accomplished to date under CPRG, and will also coincide with the next scoping plan. Next slide. So in terms of the PCAP application process, this slide shows the timeline and steps for developing the PCAP. We have been working on an accelerated timeline since our award in September to hold dozens of meetings with various stakeholders and with tribal nations to coordinate and to develop the measures that you will see below. And in addition, the state received roughly 50 written submissions from various stakeholders suggesting climate actions for the Priority Climate Action Plan. We include all the measures that we could and have begun to analyze them. Our final PCAP will be submitted to EPA on March 1st. Applications from states, MSAs, and local governments are due on April 1st as well. Next slide. For any climate measure to be eligible for CPRG implementation funding, it must be in a PCAP. With this in mind, the state has 3 goals for its PCAP. The first is to represent a no-regrets list of urgently needed climate investments aligned with the state and CPRG climate and equity goals. Second, our goal is to ensure that our measures are aligned with MSAs that are leading their own CPRG efforts to maximize climate investments across the state. And third, we need to ensure that our PCAP includes competitive climate efforts that local governments want to pursue. It's important to emphasize the third bullet here. Our PCAP has directly incorporated ideas from local governments without a planning grant, and we hope that those governments will all submit their own CPRG implementation applications as they see fit. I want to note that EPA would like to receive optional notices of intent to apply by tomorrow. You can find more information about this and all of the other competitive grant information and resources at the link on this slide. Next slide. So before we get into what is in the PCAP, I also wanted to go through a few slides that go over what we have done to develop our PCAP. And first, our PCAP includes many elements, such as California's continual conversations with stakeholders across California, ongoing synthesis of the state's existing and emerging climate plans and reports, a package of greenhouse gas measures, including updating our greenhouse gas inventory, relying on greenhouse gas targets and state statute. We are also incorporating methodologies similar to those developed in the scoping plan process to look at air pollution co-benefits. And we are finalizing other benefits related to low-income and disadvantaged communities. And we're also looking at the authority to implement the various actions in the PCAP. Let's go to the next slide. So our PCAP is aligned with our state's broad climate strategy, most recently outlined by the 2022 Scoping Plan Update, which charts a path toward carbon neutrality by 2045 and sets out to reduce anthropogenic emissions 85% below 1990 levels also by 2045. It incorporates both economy-wide emissions reductions and strategies to store carbon in healthy ecosystems and through mechanical means. Achieving carbon neutrality is California's most ambitious climate goal ever. Federal investment is needed as part of this work and will deliver major benefits. For example, the 2022 scoping plan shows that by 2045, we need 30 times as many light, medium, and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles on the road, 6 times as many electric appliances in homes, 1,700 times the amount of hydrogen supply, 4 times as much installed wind and solar generation capacity, and action on over 25 million acres of natural and working lands per year. The key outcomes as are part of this suite of actions are driving substantial greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Achieving the plan's outcomes will also result in a 94% decrease in liquid petroleum demand, a 91% decrease in fossil fuel gas used in buildings, a 66% decrease in methane emissions from agriculture, and a 10% reduction in wildfire emissions. Our PCAP measures and CPRG funding can help us implement near-term measures that is required of this sustained transformation over the next 2 decades. Next slide. There are also many contributors to our PCAP. This is a list of the types of partners we are engaging throughout the 4-year CPRG program and for the PCAP. There's the state agency CPRG task force. We're engaging with local governments such as metropolitan statistical areas, counties, and cities, air districts, tribal nations, low-income and disadvantaged community members, NGO, private sector stakeholders, and members of the public. Next slide. Like California's overall climate efforts, the development of the PCAP has been a multi-agency effort, particularly for the state agency CPRG task force members, as shown here. Next slide. We are also coordinating with all of the MSAs across the state that have been offered a CPRG planning grant to see where we can join forces and where we can complement each other's efforts. Next slide. The state have conducted outreach to tribes through numerous events, both in person and virtual, and will consult with tribes on a government-to-government basis. Our final PCAP will reflect those conversations. Next slide. Low-income communities and communities of color face disparate impacts from climate change and from its cost from the cost of confronting it. The state has centered equity in its scoping plan and other processes, and for CPRG, we are following EPA's guidance and assessing how our PCAP will affect low-income and disadvantaged communities as defined by the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, or CJEST, as well as the supplemental data provided through EPA's Environmental Justice Screening and Mapping Tool, or EJ Screen. These are shown as the yellow and light blue areas on the map. Next slide. In developing the climate measures in the PCAP, we've paid particular attention to the scoring criteria for the competitive portion of CPRG. We have aimed to elevate urgent funding needs that will be competitive under this program. EPA seems to be prioritizing measures that are well thought out and ready to implement, achieve significant greenhouse gas emissions reductions, particularly in the near term between 2025 and 2030, yield significant co-benefits such as air quality improvements, and ensure benefits accrue to low-income and disadvantaged communities, and that the measures create jobs, and that implementing agencies have a track record and the staff and capacity to implement each measure. Next slide. Lastly, we are leveraging our greenhouse gas inventory for the PCAP alongside more granular greenhouse gas emissions reductions estimates for each measure. This pie chart breaks down statewide emissions for the specific greenhouse gases that were originally included in our 2006 climate bill, AB 32. Our natural and working lands inventory is separate and is not included here. We will now go into our PCAP measures, which I want to remind the audience are draft and subject to change. We will start with transportation, our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. Next slide. So in addition to being the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, medium and heavy duty vehicles contribute heavily to air pollution across the state. We have many priority measures to address these shared challenges. In addition, I want to highlight that the double asterisks on the slide indicate measures that are particularly suited to local government authorities and can be applied for directly under CPRG. So I will first turn it over to my colleague Todd to discuss the first two PCAP measures on this list.
Thank you, Sarah Jo. For the PCAP, CARB is elevated. First of all, my name is Todd Sterling. I work for the California Air Resources Board, and I'm an air pollution specialist here. For the PCAP, CARB has elevated two ideas, creating a truck buy-down program to expend financing options for small fleets to buy zero-emission trucks, a market segment currently not served by the private sector. This would leverage the success of 3 existing incentive and loan programs and help deliver emission reductions quickly. The second aims to deploy more clean off-road equipment such as forklifts, cranes, locomotives, farm equipment, and more. This would expand CARB's existing core program, or local governments could apply for zero-emission equipment on their own. Both would address sources of air pollution for low-income and disadvantaged communities. From there, I'll pass it to my colleague at Caltrans, Kelly.
Thank you. Kelly McClendon. I am in Caltrans Freight Planning, and I'm here to talk about the Port and Freight Infrastructure Program. I'm here on behalf of Caltrans as well as the State Transportation Agency. In 2022, CalSTA, the State Transportation Agency, established the Port and Freight Infrastructure Program, or the PFIP. The PFIP is a landmark program for implementing clean, efficient, sustainable, and resilient components within the state's freight system. PFIP projects will significantly transform our freight system, but we also know that more funding is needed to scale the program and build additional shovel-ready projects. We encourage regions to include freight infrastructure projects in your upcoming applications. The PFIP will not be included in the CARB statewide implementation application, but it's important for us to include it within the statewide action plan to highlight this as a key state priority. If you would like to discuss including port and freight projects in your PCAP or in your implementation applications, please contact Jennifer Duran with Caltrans, and I will insert her chat in her email in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Up next is Jim McKinney.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim McKinney. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Fuels and Transportation Division at the California Energy Commission, and I want to talk about the CPRG truck charging proposal. Our state's 1 million trucks are essential to efficient goods movement and a healthy state economy. But these 1 million medium and heavy duty trucks represent just 3% of the 30 million vehicles in California and generate disproportionate amounts of carbon, particulate, and NOx pollution. This includes 25% of all on-road GHG emissions, 33% of on-road NOx emissions, and 70% of the known cancer risk from toxic air contaminants. Reducing diesel emissions will create important climate reduction and public health benefits for those communities located near freeways, freeway corridors, ports, and warehouse districts. Electrifying our truck fleet is one of the most promising technologies for reducing transportation diesel emissions, and fuel cells is the other major technology. We have just a handful of operational zero-emission trucks now, about less than 300 heavy-duty trucks in California. That's based on 2022 data, and about 340 delivery vans. However, at the same time, there are 140,000 orders for new zero-emission trucks nationwide, and we expect that more than half of these will come to California, as has happened with our passenger vehicles. Advanced clean fleets and advanced clean trucks will drive adoption of zero-emission trucks. And the major truck OEMs or developers, including Volvo, Daimler, PACCAR, and Navistar, are all developing zero-emission trucks. We have an immense need for truck chargers. To support and charge 155,000 medium and heavy-duty trucks by 2030, we'll need over 100,000 depot chargers and 5,500 public chargers. By 2035, to support 377,000 medium and heavy-duty trucks, we'll need 250,000 depot chargers and 8,500 chargers, public chargers. California's Energize program, or the CECs, it's called the Infrastructure Incentives for Zero-Emission Commercial Vehicles, and Energize is easier to say. This is the country's first large-scale commercial fleet ZEV infrastructure funding program. It's administered by CalSTART, and it's designed to fund near-term, shovel-ready projects. To date, we've made over 190 awards, valued at $115 million, and that's funded 1,800 chargers to support about 2,300 zero-emission trucks and buses. Some of these award windows have literally filled within minutes of our opening them. We believe this is an ideal method to rapidly distribute federal CPRG funding to shovel-ready truck charging projects in California. Now I want to speak briefly about the local deployment of ZEV infrastructure. Local and tribal governments in rural areas have the authority to plan and develop charging infrastructure and to compete for incentive funding through existing state and federal programs. Charger installations in rural areas are occurring more slowly than in urban and suburban areas, denying these communities the economic and environmental benefits of ZEV adoption. One reason is that there is often not enough demand from ZEV drivers to justify private market investments. Another issue is that existing incentive funding programs are often highly competitive, and local and tribal governments may not have the staff capacities to compete against urban and metro scale governments. This measure seeks to use community-level CPRG funding in rural and tribal communities so that they can also enjoy the economic, environmental, and technical benefits of zero-emission transportation. And I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Jim. Finally, the sixth item on this list relates to transportation actions that have been previously uplifted by communities through CARB's Clean Mobility in Schools program, the Sustainable Transportation Project STEP, and the Clean Mobility Options program. This measure could cover a diverse collection of projects, including active transportation infrastructure, new and expand zero emissions public transit and school bus services, and shared mobility services such as zero emission microtransit and e-bike lending libraries. With that, let's go to the next slide. And so to begin, California's industrial sector measures, I want to just say that this includes upstream oil and gas extraction, such as refining operations and transportation fuels, which have been discussed a little bit previously. And together with those accounts for roughly 19% of the state's total emissions. For the measure that we have here, I'm going to ask Alex to introduce our PCAP measure. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Haranjic from the California Energy Commission. So this industrial PCAP measure will allow for the expansion of the Industrial Decarbonization and Improvement to Grid Operations Program, or INDIGO. So the INDIGO program provides incentives for industrial projects that provide benefits for the electric grid and reduce greenhouse gas and local air pollution. INDIGO targets California's manufacturing sector and includes chemicals, metals, food and beverages, non-metallic minerals, and related support facilities. So with bolstered funding, additional Indigo projects will accelerate decarbonization of California's industry, expand opportunities to reduce stress on the electric grid, and provide other co-benefits such as improved air quality, job creation, and many others. Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And so for our electricity and energy measures, we are going to have a number of speakers as well. And I will just, just start by saying that electricity currently accounts for 16% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions, according to our latest inventory. And our energy measures here also include other energy fuels. So as the state begins to implement broad-scale efforts to reach our carbon neutrality target by 2045, a clean, affordable, and reliable electricity grid will serve as the backbone to support deep decarbonization across California's economy. The measures presented here would each play a unique and important role in this transition. And to begin, I will turn it over to Ron at CEC.
This is Ron Yasny with the California Energy Commission. The Energy Conservation Assistance Act, or ECA, has existed since 1979. Over its history, we have approved over $550 million of loans. Related to PCAP, ECA recently added several ideas. Reaching out to the California Native American tribes. We've added energy storage systems, and we've added electric vehicle charging infrastructure for public fleets. There is no shortage of pollution reduction projects and entities interested in undertaking those projects. For us, the limitation is available funds. There is currently a wait list of over $45 million. Thank you.
Great. And next, I will speak a little bit to the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, submitted 2 ideas, but unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. So number 2 on this list, creating a program to upgrade the capacity of our distribution systems. This idea stems from the fact that our grid needs critical upgrades to ensure that electric vehicle charging and electrification in buildings can proceed. At times, it is a bottleneck to those downstream applications. And so this measure would create a program to accelerate and ensure that our end-use electrification can happen and that our grid can support it. The third idea on this list is to expand an existing program by the California Public Utility Commission. And this one is called the Self-Generation Incentive Program. And this measure really aims at behind-the-meter storage and would particularly target low-income residents. And so with that, I will turn it over to Graham to discuss the 4th measure on this list.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Graham St. Michel. I'm with the California Department of Conservation. The department's Biomass to Carbon Negative Biofuels program seeks to fund projects that will convert California forest and agricultural biomass waste into carbon negative fuels. If supported with federal funding, the program looks to expand its scope statewide beyond its original limitation to projects that were located in the Sierra Nevada. And this expansion in scope would also draw on projects that utilize agricultural biomass in addition to forest biomass, thereby helping to catalyze a viable private market for these wastes and addressing climate impacts associated with both California agriculture and forest wildfires. The program also includes a woody biomass feedstock aggregation pilot component, which is exploring methods to promote a more predictable feedstock supply, especially in regard to forest waste. I think I'm turning it back over to you, Sergio. Is that right?
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, I'm actually going to turn it back to Alex at CEC to discuss number 5.
Hi, Alex Ranjic again from the Energy Commission. So this measure 5, the renewable microgrids for rural communities and tribes measure, will enable local governments and tribal nations in rural parts of the state to pursue clean energy microgrid projects through the CPRG implementation grants. These projects can support energy reliability and resilience for their communities. They can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and provide a multitude of other co-benefits such as economic development, improved air quality, job creation, and others. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And then finally, for the last action on this list, this was elevated by local jurisdictions to create renewable energy from various organic waste sources, such as landfill methane, woody biomass, and yard and agricultural waste and biosolids. So with that, let's go to the next slide. I will be speaking to this slide for my colleagues at CARB to elevate the importance of the high global warming potential sector. So as of the latest California greenhouse gas emission inventory, high global warming potential gases comprise 5.6% of California's greenhouse gas emissions. The one measure that we are including here would expand CARB's existing F-gas reduction incentive program, or FRIP, and propel its success in reducing high global warming potential gases from commercial and industrial refrigeration systems. Let's go to the next slide. So I will now turn it over to Tani from the California Department of Food and Agriculture to talk through the agricultural sector and the measures that we have here.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Tani Mata. I'm the director of the CDFA department, or CDFA Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation. California has the biggest agricultural economy in the US with over 400 specialty crops. We produce a third of the country's vegetables and 75% of our fruits and nuts. Dairy products are our top commodity, bringing over $10 billion a year. We're also responsible as a sector for about 8% of California's greenhouse gas emissions between ag and forestry, and about 35% of that 8% is from dairy manure management. We've identified two priorities for the PCAP. The first is expanding our Healthy Soils program. We want to continue to invest in practices on farm that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sequester carbon, as well as technical assistance to help producers with implementation. We also put in an element of expanding the dairy digester program, in particular focusing on opportunities for smaller dairies to participate in installing dairy digesters, as well as research into how we can produce hydrogen as a fuel from digester biogas. And that is what I have.
Great. Thank you, Tani. Let's go to the next slide. So in terms of natural working lands, I will be presenting this slide on behalf of the true experts at the California Natural Resources Agency and some of my colleagues here at CARB. So as climate change increases the likelihood of extreme wildfires, drought, heat, and other impacts, carbon stocks in California's natural and working lands will face increased risks and impacts. Natural working lands cover approximately 90% of the state's 105 million acres and include California's Native American tribes, ancestral and cultural lands. It also includes parks, green spaces in our cities and communities, and the waters and iconic landscapes that the nation knows and loves. The first measure in our PCAP would bolster the Forest Health Program, an initiative of the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, or CAL FIRE, and it would expand funding for a critical range of activities, including fuel reduction, controlled burns, pest management, reforestation projects, and biomass utilization. This measure would expand urban canopy while delivering energy conservation and stormwater runoff reduction. Sorry, that second one, it goes to the second bullet for the expanding of the urban forestry project. So the urban forestry project would also help enhance public health, provide critical shade and water quality and soil benefits. For the third measure on the list, we're promoting the expansion of the existing wetland restoration program to support a variety of wetland restoration projects, including re-wetting peat soils to reduce carbon emissions, restoring mountain meadows for carbon sequestration, and enhancing wetland biodiversity. So those are our natural working lands measures. Let's go to our last slide. So for the waste sector, I will go ahead and turn it over to Scott.
Sure thing. Thank you. My name is Scott Beckner, and I manage the Business Assistance and Market Development team here at CalRecycle, and I coordinated the development of CalRecycle's proposal for this PCAP. Of the proposals we prepared, 2 are included in this draft statewide PCAP: organics recycling infrastructure and food waste prevention and recovery. Both are existing, very large programs at CalRecycle, but are lacking funding currently and could be administered. They could be administered locally as well. So we want to make sure we encourage MSAs and locals to really take a look and consider including these in your own plans. Starting with food waste prevention and edible food recovery. These are strategies to reduce the amount of food wasted in landfill, and they represent huge opportunities to help relieve food insecurity issues that millions of Californians face every day. And they also just so happen to reduce a substantial amount of methane. According to our recent waste characterization study, 4.3 million tons of food is sent to landfill each year in California, and that includes 1.5 million tons of potentially donatable food. To date, CalRecycle has provided about $28 million through several grant programs, resulting in the equivalent of approximately 242 million meals recovered. But there's a lot more that can be done, and we believe these CPRG funds can continue to the good work California has already done in this space, particularly given the current budget situation and unclear funding picture for new cycles. And I want to again encourage MSAs to include similar language in their PCAPs to maximize the impact we have with these funds. The second climate action that's included in the PCAP is expanding California's composting, anaerobic digestion, and co-digestion infrastructure, as well as infrastructure to recycle biomass feedstocks. When the state's SB 1383 goals and program is fully implemented, California will need to divert an additional 12 to 14 million tons of organic waste, and we have an organic recycling capacity shortfall of about 8 million tons currently. This underscores just how critical the need is to continue investing in organics recycling infrastructure. And despite significant contributions from the state, including a really exciting and large grant program this last year, we in fact awarded $130 million to 23 projects, but 10 eligible projects were waitlisted due to lack of funds. And CPRG funding could bring these projects to fruition and could attract substantial matching private investments in the process. So there are, of course, many other countless opportunities worthy of inclusion in things like this that aren't captured. So I just really want to encourage MSAs throughout the state to consider including materials management in general in their plans, things like reuse and source reduction. And thanks, Sarah Jo, for your hard work coordinating all this.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for your kind words. So let's go to our next slide, which I think brings us to bringing up onto the virtual stage our colleagues at the Fresno Council of Governments. I'm very glad that you could be presenting with us today. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon. My name is Simran Judy. I'm a senior regional planner at Fresno Council of Governments and serving as a project manager for the Fresno MSA's EPA CPRG grant. I'm joined today by 2 members of the project team who will introduce themselves when they present. Next slide, please. So this timeline showcases the milestones throughout the Priority Climate Action Plan development. We began in October by gathering a stakeholder steering committee, and as a result of our January stakeholder steering committee meeting, the project team finalized the 12 measures for the PCAP. Currently, a draft of the PCAP is available and is anticipated to be adopted in time for the March 1st deadline. Next slide, please. The deliverables of the PCAP include the GHG inventory, measures of GHG reduction, and the preliminary benefit analysis to the low-income and disadvantaged communities of Fresno County. Next slide, please. So the initial deliverable, as mentioned, is the GHG emissions inventory. For the Fresno region, it was gathered that nearly half of the emissions were from transportation, which might be quite universally applicable. However, the second highest emitting sector is agriculture, which is unique to the region and is highly representative of the San Joaquin Valley. Later on in the presentation, Christine will introduce the prioritization and measures selected as a result of the outreach, but this pie chart is a helpful visual in understanding the GHG emission sectors. Next slide, please. And so as a regional planning agency, our PCAP warranted stakeholders from all 16 member jurisdictions for Fresno Cog serves, as well as key partners such as disadvantaged community representation, the Air District, transit, and industry experts. The primary role of the Stakeholder Steering Committee is to provide input and approve recommendations. In addition to the input from the stakeholders, the public input also guided the PCAP development. In the next few slides, Brenda will outline the public outreach. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Simran. Fresno Cog's approach to the PCAP outreach was to conduct as comprehensive a robust public process as time allowed. So Fresno Cog began with a development of a community engagement hub or website for the climate pollution reduction grants process, using publicinput.com as online platform to create the hub. The site, as you can see here, has tabbed information that includes overall project timeline with milestones, a get involved section summarizing all of the community engagement opportunities, including a survey tool. Meetings contained in this tab are past and present meeting information, PowerPoints, recordings of meetings so people can catch up if they weren't able to attend. A stay updated section offered an opportunity to sign up to receive notifications about PCAP, about CPRG, hosted CPRG background information and links to maps, the EPA's website, any resources I could find that people might be interested in. Resources address the disadvantaged community comparison maps and mapping tool. Those are hosted there, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And Contact Us provided our local Fresno Cog staff and consultant contact information. And then on the site, there was a dedicated comment email address, as you can see in the bottom right, and voicemail line where people could call and just leave a comment and it would automatically be transcribed into our system. Next slide, please. Fresno Cog's primary tool for collecting community input was this greenhouse gas reduction survey, which was also built in public input and kind of marries into the hub. It was available online and in hard copy in English and Spanish. And due to the compressed timeline that Sarah Jo talked about, Fresno Cog's online survey ran for just over 2 weeks. But we really tried to get input over that time. Survey respondents were asked to provide their home address so that we could assess how many responses were being received from people who lived in disadvantaged communities. And then they were asked to rank 4 sectors of high priority greenhouse gas reduction measures. Next slide, please. We publicized the survey through our community partners, that stakeholder committee that Simran talked about, who shared survey links and invitations with their contacts. And then COG also used, of course, social media accounts and distributed focused emails and newsletters to our contact database. And then staff attended 3 in-person community meetings that were being held within rural unincorporated disadvantaged communities. Got to sit down with them, explain PCAP, have conversations, and then walk them through the survey. And then we did the same with 2 virtual meetings that we hosted. Next slide, please. All the comments received from the online and the hard copy surveys, the dedicated project email account, the voicemail, and the linked social media accounts regarding priority measures were automatically transcribed and incorporated into the online survey results from public input. And then Fresno Cog also received comments via just regular email, which we forwarded to our consultant for consideration. This high-level map shows you the general survey area respondents lived within. In total, over 2 weeks' time, the survey was viewed 500, actually it was 604. I went back to this later. 117 total responses, people who answered the whole survey. And then they gave us 1,261 responses, 22 additional comments regarding things we didn't ask about, and 24 people signed up to subscribe to get more information as the process moves forward. Next slide, please. Something happened to this map. But you can see on the hub that there's a climate and economic justice screening tool map that shows the disadvantaged areas in aqua blue by TAS. And then it's overlaid with the survey respondents' home location. So we could assess and see that the majority of our survey respondents were from disadvantaged communities within the Fresno County region. Again, that map is available on our hub if you want to take a look at it. Next slide, please. This slide provides an example of the survey rankings that we received by 2 of the sectors. The lower the score, the higher the ranking. So you can see top to bottom, the first item in transportation measure scored the best. It's a little confusing, but all of the rankings and additional comments are available also on our hub, all the comments received as well. And they were provided to our consultant for then review and development of the plan and selecting those final priority measures. So now I will turn it over to Christine Kai, who is with LSA.
Thank you, Brenda. As Brenda mentioned, my name is Christine Kai. I am with LSA. We are the project consultant for Fresno COG's PCAP. Next slide, please. So Fresno COG use a multi-pronged approach to select the priority measures for the PCAP. First of all, we use the GHG inventory to select the top 3 priority sectors for the priority measures. As Simran showed you in the pie chart, the top 3 sectors with the highest GHG emissions in Fresno County are the transportation sector, ag sector, and the building energy sector. And Fresno COG also considered the community interest with the implementation grant in the consideration of the priority measures. So Fresno COG from several communities heard from several community groups about their interest in the waste sector. Eventually, the waste sector was included as one of the priority sectors in the process. Then the consulting team with the 4 priority sectors, the consulting team developed draft priority measures based on EPA's guidance that the priority measures must be near-term, implementation ready, cost feasible, and considerable GHG reduction. So a total of 23 draft priority measures were drafted, and then Fresno COG sent those priority measures to the stakeholder groups who are sitting on the advisory committee, and also sent out to the public through Fresno COG's public outreach process. Next, please. And this is the results from the stakeholder survey and as well as the public survey. The stakeholder group were asked to rank all the 23 measures across the 4 sectors, and the public was asked to rank the 23 measures within each sector. The reason we decided to do that is the 23 measures are a lot of measures still go through, and with people sitting on the stakeholder, we think they have more exposure to all the measures during their work process. So they will be more comfortable with rating all the measures across the 4 sectors. With the public, we don't want to overwhelm them with asking them to rate the measures across 4 sectors. So we just ask them to rate the measures within each sector. Next, please. So based on the results of the surveys, Fresno COG decided to recommend the 13 priority measures across 4 sectors. And Fresno COG picked 5 measures for the transportation measure that include EV strategies, bike and ped strategies, municipal fleet conversion strategy, transit and the carpool van pool strategies. For the ag sector, there are 3 measures that are recommended to be the priority measures. They are the manure management, egg burning, and also egg equipment GHG reduction measures. For the building energy sector, 3 measures were recommended by Fresno COG staff. They are the energy efficient appliance, water efficiency, and also on-site renewable energy generation strategy. And then for the waste sector, there are 2 measures that were selected by Fresno COG staff. They are to reduce and divert waste, and also the wastewater treatment efficiency. Next, please. I'll turn it over to Sinran.
So that concludes our presentation for today. I'm really grateful that we were able to showcase what the Central Valley conducted with the PCAP, and this QR code can take you to the hub where our draft plan is out until about the end of this month. I think February 23rd, if you would like to make comments or review the PCAP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you here, and I'm glad we could have you present all of the work that you've done in the Central Valley. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So at this point, we would like to shift gears and begin our public comment. And so thank you for waiting. Well, I saw that a few hands came up, but thank you for holding your comments until this portion. So we'll now move into comments from all participants. As a reminder, if you'd like to share feedback or ask a question, please use the raise hand button, which should be located on the bottom of your Zoom window as shown. And if you, when staff calls on you, you can activate your audio controls. Please click the unmute button and proceed to introduce yourself and provide your comment. Stakeholders will also be able to submit written feedback online until February 10th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And you can find a link to submit feedback as well as the relevant documents on our CPRG meetings and workshops page. As a reminder, we are limiting comments today to about 2 minutes to accommodate as many people as we can. We also have a timer at the top right of the screen so that you can see how much time you have remaining. With that, I'm going to ask my colleague Jamie to help facilitate the public comment session.
Thank you so much, Sarah Jo. On my list here, I see Salma. I'm going to allow you to talk. And the next one in line is Mark Blakely. Salma, can you unmute?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much to CARB and all the agencies for your guys' presentation. I just have a quick question in regards to the California budget. I know that with Newsom's January proposal, a lot of buckets of funding or pools of funding, as well as grant programs, were either delayed to future years, or a significant chunk of their budget was reduced. Are there plans to include those programs in the PCAP as well? Have they already been included? And yeah, what is CARB and the CEC and the associated agencies planning on doing in terms of potential cuts for next year's budget?
Yes, so in terms of the PCAP process, it really started before we knew any of the details about the state budget. And really what we were looking for in elevating existing programs were programs that had a proven track record. The administrative side of them were already set up, so we could deliver projects and emissions reductions pretty quickly. So we were looking at programs that even in good budget years had been oversubscribed. CPRG, we're not really looking at it as a way to shore up the state budget, but really as a way to facilitate continued emissions reductions through proven programs. So the timing, I recognize the timing that you're talking about with the state budget being what it is, but really the Priority Climate Action Plan process has operated somewhat independently of the state budget process, or completely independently, I should say.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next is Mark Blakely. You may unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you for hosting and walking through this webinar. This has been incredibly helpful. I just had one question on the different measures that CARB was going through earlier during this webinar. I noticed that the stars says that these indicates that measures something that a local government can apply through. Does that mean that the other measures are not eligible for like local MSAs?
So the measures without an asterisk, and as they are written in the PCAP, the state would be the implementing actor, but the measures that had an asterisk next to them, a local government that's eligible to pursue CPRG funding could write their own application and reference the state's priority climate action plan. So for any measure to be eligible for CPRG funding, it has to be listed in somebody's priority climate action plan. And for the person applying, it has to be the same geography. So there are a number of measures that the state could pursue or local governments could pursue. And so I wanted to make sure that that was marked by those asterisks.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was thinking when I was reading that, I thought I was reading it as like CARB will be leading this. So like a local MSA could not do like a zero emission truck program.
Yeah, so the zero emission truck program would be implemented by the state. So that one would not really be picked up by a local government, but the ones where there are asterisks could be picked up by local governments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question.
Madeline Aldridge, apologies if I pronounced your name incorrectly. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you did great with the name. Malin Aldridge from Ecology Action, and we're a nonprofit working in California on various climate pollution reduction activities. And one of the questions that I had is around eligibility of technical assistance underneath a plan. An example might be small fleets or HFC conversion. And so small fleet electrification, oftentimes the small fleets, there's the things like Energize program out there that have great rebates, can be charging and vehicle rebates combined, but the fleet operators are really too small to have to gain the attention of the market, like the providers that usually help electrify big fleets, the equipment manufacturers and so forth. So they need technical assistance. Same in HFC reduction, large grocers like Target or Walmart might have the staff to do that, but small groceries, independent ethnic grocers on the edges of food deserts probably, don't have the capabilities to absorb the money from FRIP, for example. And I'm just curious how, and if technical assistance is an eligible add-on to these, the monies that I see are, from the presentation, going to be added to FRIP, it looks like, and to Energize program. Just curious how folks are thinking about the technical assistance element.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So for any applications, it has to be a government entity that would apply to receive CPRG implementation funds. And so in the application, which is separate from the Priority Climate Action Plan, entities could choose to have a line item related to technical assistance as part of what they're pursuing funding for. So it's really up to the applicant if they want to include that in their application. And one thing that you did maybe was unclear from our presentation that seems to be coming up a little bit in your question is that all of the measures listed here are not exactly going to be what we apply for. So these are the priority climate action measures that were identified, but it doesn't mean that all of these measures are going to be in our application.
Got it. But they'll be eligible for application by eligible entities.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Sam Hall, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good afternoon. Appreciate your time today and reviewing this information. Is it possible to
Sorry, may I
appropriate-
pause you? I'm having trouble hearing you, Sam.
Is this any better?
Slightly better. Could you speak louder into your speaker, please?
Sorry.
Apologies if it's just my computer.
No, I also couldn't hear the question.
Okay. Sam, if you don't mind, we'll come back to you. Evan Edgar.
Hello, my name is Evan Edgar. I represent the California Compost Coalition, and I really like the plan with regard to including bioenergy for anaerobic digestion and for composting and use of that compost on the natural working lands. So not only do we get methane reduction at the landfills, we get to sequester carbon into the working lands of California. What has shown this is the biggest bang for the buck. If you look at the Cal EPA puts out the California Climate Investment have mid-year updates, and they have different metrics on cost effectiveness and what it means on cost per greenhouse gas reduced per dollar invested. And the compost and anaerobic digestion are at $50 per ton, where some of the transportation ones are over $1,000 a ton to go ZEVs. And zero emission vehicles aren't really zero because you have to charge them with grid power and you have to manufacture the batteries. But should this plan follow the best cost effective program and the most bang for the buck, compost and anaerobic digestion should receive a priority funding in this plan. And those are the comments going to have before February 11th. But following the Cal EPA's own climate investment plan, all the good work you've done in the scoping plan, CARB has a great history with this, and you guys should be able to get a lot of funding because you guys are on top of it. So great work from CowerCycle on putting out the infrastructure grants. They got a B list ready to go. It was oversubscribed. They put out $130 million. And over $380 million were applied for, so 3 times oversubscribed. So having this money coming now is great to piggyback on the good work CowerCycle has done on the current infrastructure grants for compost and anaerobic digestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan.
Sam, are you able to unmute and we can try again? Sam Hall, are you still there? I'm not seeing any other hands raised right now, Sarah Jo.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jamie. If that's the case, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, I see one more hand.
Amari, you can unmute.
I'm Roberto from AMBAG. I just want to say I really like Energy Measure 6 and enable renewable microgrids for rural communities and tribes. And I was just wondering, my comment would be if that could be maybe expanded a little bit to include measures that could occur concurrently with the microgrid. Usually in these types of projects, it's a sort of once in a facility opportunity to make upgrades to the facilities as well, such as electrification or energy efficiency. And so I think it would be more competitive if that measure could be a bit more comprehensive in that way. Thank you.
Thanks, Amari. If you also, your point here is well taken. If there are specifics that you want to elevate that you would like to see as part of that measure, I really encourage you to put them in writing on our public comment page so that we can be sure to capture any details that you have in mind. Thank you for your comment.
Will do. Thank you.
I don't want to close this out prematurely. Maybe people are still thinking of their questions. Maybe just give it one more more beat before we turn to next steps in case there are any other hands out there that are trying to come up.
Joel White, you may unmute.
Is there any way, when you were talking about the asterisks, meaning that there's a local government entity, so I'm taking that as a MSA, is there any way to link which MSA has put that forward?
So there, a lot of the local measures that the asterisk measures that we're elevating for local action, this is really for local governments that don't have an MSA planning grant. So of the 10 MSAs that have been offered a planning grant, they are likely going to be pursuing their own applications, and so covering their operations in those areas. A lot of the local actions that we're elevating here are to cover the parts of the state that otherwise don't have a local planning grant. And so you're talking about cities and counties kind of outside of those MSAs that we showed previously on our slides. And for those entities, it's really kind of up to them to see if they want to pursue an application and to reference the state's PCAP as part of that application. And so a lot of the ideas that are in here that reference local action have already been elevated by local governments without a planning grant.
Okay, so just because a town or county hasn't shown up as MSA, it means they still could be involved in preparing a PCAP by March 1st?
No, so the planning grants were awarded in September. And so that part of the grant program is over. So there will be, I don't think there is an opportunity to apply for a planning grant and for local governments who aren't already in the process of doing that to begin one.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Blakely.
Thank you. Sorry, I just have a second question. There's I noticed that CARB is including measures from all 6 sectors in its PCAP. And I was just curious, in the implementation plan, has CARB started, and state as a whole, given any thought of like what would potentially be the request breakdown for a grant from the EPA? I'm just curious if like has already been a certain measures that are being targeted internally within CARB in the state that are priority measures in each of these different sectors.
Yeah, it's a good question. We are still kind of hammering that out, to be perfectly honest. We won't be able to apply for everything that's in the PCAP. One of the things that we haven't said yet is that the funding award. And so the amounts that EPA is looking to award range between $2 million and $500 million per application. And each level of government can submit 2 applications, one as a lead applicant and one as a lead of a coalition. And so the state is really looking at probably doing a single application, and EPA will say yes or no to that application for all of the different measures that are a part of it. And so we won't be able to submit an application that includes all of the measures in our PCAP. There's too much work to do, even for $500 million in this PCAP. And also we have to create a narrative that makes sense as a package rather than, individual measures that EPA would say yes or no to. And so there's still some internal work to decide exactly what will be in the application. But as part of releasing the PCAP, we can hear a little bit more from our stakeholders, and ultimately the decision is with our governor's office.
Okay, no, thank you for this that really comprehensive question. I know there's a lot of work that is done at the PCAP level and then at the implementation level. I was just curious because I know like everyone's looking at like the greenhouse gas reductions before 2030 and then after 2030. So I was just curious for CARB's thought process on that. So thank you so much for your time and your answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Nicola Stielnek. You may unmute yourself.
Hi, my name's Nicola Stielnak. Thank you so much for this presentation. Really appreciate you spending your time. I know that you mentioned that this is a draft, obviously. So I was curious, kind of what level of edits are you expecting to see? Like, would it be more on like a detail level, or would there potentially be some of the measures that were presented about today would not make the final PCAP?
At this point, I don't expect that we would take measures out. We might change them a little bit, maybe put some additional detail on them to clarify what they are and what they're not. And there is the possibility that we would receive, for example, some priority measures from a tribal nation that we will include in our final PCAP, which are not included here today. So there's the chance for some additions along those lines as well. And I think that there will be the draft PCAP is available on our website as of today. Also doesn't include some of the analysis that is ongoing. So the greenhouse gas emissions estimate per measure is not included, and some other details on each of the measures is also kind of still in the works. But we wanted to make sure that we had this conversation before all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed.
That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Currently don't see any other raised hands.
Okay, well, those were some really great questions. So let's go ahead and go to our last slide here. So just again, thank you for all the feedback today. We really appreciate the chance to be able to present our work and to hear from all of you. We also, again, will encourage any interested stakeholders to submit written feedback online using the link on this slide. And we look forward to reviewing what you submit. In addition, we encourage any eligible entities who have submitted ideas to our PCAP to pay particular attention to the application process and the rules that EPA has laid out for the competitive part of CPRG. A link to EPA's website is included on this slide in yellow highlights. And we wish everybody here today all the luck in any applications that they do submit. And just again, thank you to all of the presenters who joined the virtual stage with me. And thank you to everybody who took the time out of their day to attend this webinar and ask good questions. Have a good day, everybody.